Carolyn Tomei, State Representative, and you are watching Milwaukee Today. We're doing a series of shows about the history of Milwaukee, and so we're calling these Milwaukee Yesterday. I have as my guests today a couple of wonderful women, Elizabeth Hager, thank you Elizabeth, and Madalaine Bohl. Madalaine is also with the Milwaukee Historical Society, the curator there. So thank you ladies for joining us. We're going to talk today about Hager's Pond, which everybody knows. My children loved that as they were growing up and went to elementary school there on, what street is that, 27th? Right. And now I bring my grandchildren there whenever they're in town. Everybody loves going by the pond and seeing the pond and the animals, etc. So your husband was a Hager, is a Hager, even though he's got the name Bohl too. Which
yeah, he's still around.
Yes, good. And your husband, Paul Hager, grew up on the pond, is that correct?
Right.
Right, yeah.
He was born there.
He was born in that wonderful place on Washington and 27th, right? Mm-hmm. Before there was Hager's Pond there were strawberry fields. And Madalaine, you brought some wonderful pictures of the strawberry fields, and these are marked 1 for Richard, who will be putting these. So tell us about that. What was there? You don't remember that, but you remember.
No, I don't remember it. No, we just have information from, his name was Philip Henneman, and he apparently built the house there in the late 1800s, and I'm not sure about how long he lived there, probably 15 years maybe before he sold
He built
it.
it in 1880.
Okay, yeah, so it'd be about
moved
that.
out in 1912.
Okay,
right.
Yeah. And then went to Selwood, and he had strawberry fields, and they went from Washington Street up 27th, which wasn't there at the time, but about that area up to where the grade school is now. And he was about the first person real successfully raising and selling strawberries. So I brought a picture that has the strawberry fields.
That's wonderful.
As well as the original house with Mr. Henneman's,
Right, that picture is here.
standing in front of it.
Right.
He had 2 boys and 2 girls, and we've been in contact with his granddaughter, who lives in Eugene at this time, Helen Bach. And she's been giving us some information about the Hennemans and that kind of stuff and filling in some little voids and
So what is some of the information from him?
Well, just what they were doing and more about her mother, who was Henneman's daughter, Clara. And we've most recently got a handkerchief from the Lewis and Clark Exposition that Clara got a hold of, and then Helen got a hold of it, and so she donated it to the museum. So
that's great.
We're going to have a little special entry when it comes to the Lewis and Clark celebration.
Wonderful.
In a couple years.
Yeah, coming right up. Now, so did Mr. Henneman have the strawberry fields?
Yes.
So those were his, and this was his home that was built in
1880.
1880. And the house is still there, pretty much intact as it was, right?
Yeah, it didn't have the side porch on it originally. The picture show there, it just had a little entry into the side.
Right.
Yeah, Papa built the porch.
Papa, meaning Fritz.
Yeah, Fritz built the porch on.
Fritz Hager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Good. And now we have a picture from 1914. Now, Fritz moved in there in 1912?
I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay. And this is a picture of Hager Place with the fence around it, 2746 Washington Street, Milwaukee. So this is from 1914, right? Great picture, yes. And this is a picture. Tell us about this picture. Let's see, I better mark these so Richard will know. This is 3, and this is
Papa
4.
Fritz and Anna, and down at the end of the pond. It was just a creek when he moved there, and they always said if he had a bag of cement and running water, he was happy. And that's where he built the pond.
Right. And so this is Fritz and Hannah. Now tell us, Anna. With a cow there at the pond. And it's pretty much just as it is now.
This was the boat shelter. It was just a roof. It was in the pond. They put the boat in. That was there when we first moved there. And then it kind of fell down.
Great. Now, where was he born?
Adelbahn, Switzerland, I believe is the name of it.
So what brought him to Oregon? Do you know, either of you know that?
his older brother came over, and he liked it so much that he wanted to bring the whole family, and all but the younger brother came.
Ah. And
I
how old
thought
was
the younger
Fritz?
brother came and then went back.
Did he go back?
Yeah,
Ah.
Gottlieb went.
Gottlieb, yeah.
Went back.
So how old was Fritz when he came?
But you mentioned it. I think it was
Yeah, it's
17,
16, 17.
16
yeah,
or
16,
17.
Right.
Okay, they came in 88 and he was born in 71, so he was 17.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, there is an article here. So this is another picture of the pond. I better put the number on this one. This is going to be number 5. And when, well, that's in the 70s, I guess, isn't it?
Yeah, that was a later picture that was in one of the newspapers. It really shows the pond area with the walls and that kind of thing.
And this was, we called it the White Barn, and this was the big barn. And the little white barn is where he kept his cows. And
Yeah.
Did
Because
he
that's
have-
down below the other one kind of.
yeah, it was kind
Was
of
off the
behind this. And
How much property was there?
it's a little over an acre.
A lot of,
Okay, yeah. It doesn't look that big because it goes down and up and around.
Yeah,
and
it
looks
goes down
bigger
to
to
the
you know,
pond.
it gives a different look to it.
yeah,
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 yeah, because you're looking at more land, technically, with the hills on both sides.
Yeah,
that's right, yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. And are there still livestock there?
well, I think the fellow that lives there now has some sheep. I saw some of there one
Yeah, I
day.
think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, Fritz sounds like such an interesting man. Tell us some about him. Now, here is a picture. This is number 6 from 1930. No, my numbers are wrong. From 1938. So tell us some about that picture. Ancient system still used in Milwaukee.
Yeah, he ran his tool shop with belts, no power. I mean, no motor power, electric power.
yeah.
But he had all these belts, and he just switched them from one pulley to another.
And how did he get that power? How did
From the wheel, from the big
water wheel?
big wheel
big
at
water
the
wheel.
foot of the pond.
That's still there.
Yeah, yeah. And he had a wheel at the other end that ran the water pump, and he had a little cemented in area where he had a spring water come in for the pump to pump
Right.
it up to the house. And he had a water tower for, it finally fell down. And sometimes he would fill the tower and you could have water just flow in. And then other times he decided to use the wheel and the pump. And
So this was water for use in the house.
Yes.
So the big water tower would give pressure, so you
Yeah.
could just turn on a faucet and have
and
water
it just,
coming in.
yeah, it just gravity flow.
Right. So what was it like if we didn't have the water tower? What was it like? Like, because you lived there, right? When did
Yeah,
you move there?
we moved there in '48, and he still used his own water, but I couldn't take it. It just wasn't pure enough for me, so we had city water put in. But
Later,
we
but-
did have the pump going.
And so what was it like when the pump was going? What was the water like when you turn on the faucet? What was it
only
like?
it just went splip, splip
Because it was coming from the water wheel.
two different. Well, there was 2 lungs or whatever we called it to the pump, and they went up and down when the wheel turned.
Right.
And you just waited for your water. It didn't come just like you'd expected it
When
to.
you turn on a faucet, it was not like
No,
city water.
we just had a wire that we pulled from the nail up here to the nail down here, and that activated the wheel. And from
The
the
wire. Now, how did
well,
the
he had a
work?
wire. He had a wire going down to the gate, to the water gate. That was it was across, and it raised the gate and let the water come through, and the water went into the wheel cups and turned the wheel, and this is what activated the pump.
So you could pull a wire inside the house
Yep.
that lifted up the gate, that allowed the water to go into the water wheel, which activated the running water in the house.
And he also had a wire from his bedroom when we first moved there, in his bedroom he had a big thing kind of shaped like that with pegs around it. And that ran the big wheels, and he could have electricity. But he was real Scotch, and he only ran the electricity when he was in the house. Mama had to use kerosene lamps
Really?
until he decided to turn the wheel on so he could have his own electricity. It was direct current. And she couldn't have an iron or anything like that. She had to do her iron, you know, the old-fashioned way on the stove.
And heat up the iron and iron that
Yeah,
way, right?
because he wouldn't get alternating current so that she could use any modern appliances.
But he did have enough electricity for lights?
Yes, he had, well, we called it the land of the dim bulb because it was just lights hanging direct, you know, no shades, nothing, just lights down with a bulb.
Yeah.
And when he decided to run the wheel, then the house had electricity.
Right. That is just fascinating. So he also did other things. This shows a picture of him at some kind of a work.
Working there in the shop.
Yeah, he was in his shop. Yeah,
He was kind of an inventor.
he invented a saw. That was what it was. And oh, it was a secret. It was a deep, dark secret. And then after he got it all put together and invented and everything, he realized that someone else had beat him to it.
Oh, which is not terribly unusual. Great minds
No.
thinking alike. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But he wanted to get a patent for it.
Yes.
And
And he couldn't because someone else had beat him to it. And it was to make rafters or something like that, to cut angles, I think it was. I
some kind of
finally
a-
saw it, but I didn't mean that much to me, really.
yeah.
He finally had to let it out. But he worked in there days on end.
Well, there's wonderful pictures of all of these pulleys and different machinery.
Yeah, he had, we had a lathe drill press, all sorts of things. He had a forge in there. He could build a little fire and melt metal, you know, and with this little thing. And it was real. He was a very fascinating old fellow. He really was. Kind of ornery, but fascinating.
And he was sort of a character around town, wasn't he?
Yes.
Not hear that?
Yeah.
And he wasn't a very tall man. He was how tall?
Very
was he?
short.
Very short.
Oh, he wasn't even 5 foot, was he? I don't believe he was. I think he was 4'11" or.
Could have been. Yeah.
Yeah, he was quite short.
Right.
And his older brothers were considerably taller. And this may have been a bearing on his attitude too, you know, being small. He had to kind of put on a show.
Yeah. Well, he sounds like just a wonderful character.
Yeah, because we heard stories about him, you know, walking around Milwaukie with his wagon and collecting string and wire and anything he found on the ground he'd bring back and use. But when they moved in, like you said, it was just a little stream running through there, and then he took the concrete and mixed up and built the pond. That's why I brought the picture of the pond.
Right.
Show that there's a lot of work in
Oh,
and
yeah.
the funnels that he had, or funnels, whatever you call them, that went down to the water wheel and
Flumes.
Flumes. Yeah, I knew there was.
Yeah,
a word.
he had a flume through the garden area that ran the wheel. And Paul actually helped him on
Paul
the
is
wheel.
your husband.
Yes, he helped him on the wheel when he was just a kid. So
How many children were in the family?
There originally was 7, and they lost 2 little ones, 2 little girls, quite young. And so there was 5 actually that grew up.
And why don't you say who they were?
Well, there's Ernest is the oldest, and when he went off to school up to Milwaukie Elementary, he couldn't speak English. And they had to teach him English because he had spoken German all the time at home, or Swiss German. And then there was Martha and Dan. Dan's still alive, and Martha's alive. Ernie died a few years back. And who else?
Paul.
Marie,
Paul and
Marie and
Marie.
Paul.
Paul
yeah.
and Marie. Ah,
Yeah.
that's great. And we have a picture here of Fritz Hager overlooking Spring Creek Pond. This is number 7. It says Hager built the islands and harnessed the water, making it the water wheel used for power in his shop.
Yeah, and on the islands he had a lighthouse on the first island, and on the second one he had a little teeny water wheel about that big, and a church. There's the
yeah,
church.
they're both on there.
The church and the water wheel. And the water wheel actually ran. And
Are those still there?
no,
What happened to them?
Dan took the water wheel and
In the church?
the church and was going to rebuild, but he never did. He never brought them back.
And
'Cause I think
Dan,
the other tower, the lighthouse is sort of
is-
still there.
It's still
in-
there.
Yeah, he's kind of.
right. And Dan is one of the sons?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's still intact somewhere.
Yeah, my husband remembers Fritz Hager telling him the facts of life. He'd go out and visit him in his room, and he used to say, "You know how babies were made?" And my husband would say, "No." He says, "Well, there's this great big machine, and you'd have to get up really early in the morning, and you have to crank it. It's really, really hard." And then he'd just burst out laughing. So my husband's fact of life, were a little skewed there for a few years.
And here's another wonderful article. This is number 8. Bonneville Ha. So let's talk some about this. What?
Well, because of the electricity that he was giving to his own house, he didn't have to buy
Yeah.
Yeah.
the power. So that's kind of what that article's about.
Yeah. Yeah. Talks about what a character he was. So.
Oh, he was a character. He really was. He was just different, very different.
Well, he had his ways that you did hit his way.
Well, one thing I can remember Paul, my husband, telling me is that one time they went to the Oaks and he bought one Eskimo bar and cut it into 5 pieces and gave each of the kids a piece. And they still talk about that, how ridiculous that was. One little Eskimo bar cut into 5 pieces. And they just, he had this big old car. I did find a picture of the car I'll have to bring.
Good.
That he had too. It was an old touring car, big old Buick, I believe.
Oh, yeah, I've got that picture that has everybody in it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
great picture. If you can bring it, we'll have Richard show that.
Yeah, it's so he was real interesting, and because he thought he was doing the kids a good deed by giving them a fifth of this ice cream bar. that he was kind of a tight old feller.
Well, how did he make his living? I mean, was he able to make a living from the inventions and that kind of thing?
No, I don't.
So I
He
heard
worked
about
in the
one
box factory.
box and veneer factory down there where the
Where was that? I don't remember.
well, it's down where the sewer treatment plant is.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah, right
Bay.
along
Yeah,
the
so I could
riverbank.
walk down there.
Yeah, he did work there for a while.
Yeah.
'Cause I think he held a patent on some kind of a bookbinding apparatus at one time.
could have, yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I've seen his writing, and it's just beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
Gorgeous handwriting.
Yes.
You see this little short guy, and you think, oh, not that short can't write, but I mean, I'm going to get myself in trouble here.
No, but
He was just so Scotch and everything. You just don't think about him being real flowery with his handwriting.
Probably he
So
learned
it's
that
funny.
in Switzerland.
well, that's
Yeah,
true.
he learned
Because
watchmaking.
my own father learned his handwriting in England, and it was absolutely beautiful too. And so it must be old country traits.
Right.
You know.
You learned it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But he grew the front lawn into hay.
That was for the cow?
Yeah, and the kids couldn't go into it. And Paul said on occasion they lost balls and things in there because if he found them, he never gave them back because he wanted to teach them a lesson.
Ah.
And her husband, he left, what was it he borrowed? Arrow set, bow and arrow from Ruthie, and left it out.
Oh.
And Papa found it, and that was the end of that.
No, I remember about the wagon that you left out.
Oh,
Yeah, well, the wheelbarrow.
Was it a wheelbarrow? I thought it was a
Yeah.
wagon.
I think it was a wheelbarrow that he
Okay.
took that I left in the driveway, and you just didn't leave things out. He picked them up, and that was that. He taught you a lesson. That was his way.
And you were an adult now. You were
Yeah.
married, and you'd moved into the house after
Yeah.
Mrs. Hager had died. His
Yeah.
wife had died. And so you moved in the house, so as an adult. So this was a lesson he was giving you
Yep.
as an
No,
adult.
he gave it to my husband.
Oh.
No, the toy was for my husband and said, you can't leave it out or you'll lose it. So he didn't leave it out.
I did.
She did.
And I couldn't
So
convince.
she lost it for him.
Oh.
And we
So-
never did find it. We never did.
Oh,
He
that's
took it
funny.
into the shop, and that was the end of it. But that was his way to teach
Yeah.
lessons.
Well, he was, because Paul remembers out there sawing a board and he was sawing it real fast and Fritz came along and said, you're sawing it too fast, you can't saw straight if you're sawing it that fast. And he says, well, I'm not trying to saw it straight, I'm just sawing. You know,
As a kid.
well, then he couldn't saw either. Take the saw away if you're not going to saw right.
Oh, and he also, one time under the water tower, he was playing with his cars, and he accidentally...
Your husband.
No.
her husband.
Oh, okay, Paul.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was out there playing, just a little kid, and he accidentally touched a pipe, and well, they were old and rusty, and it dribbled. And Papa just, you'd think, you know, the water was paid for the whole bit. And
Because
it wasn't, it was
wasting
just
water.
coming from the creek. And he just had a fit because Fritz was wasting, little Fritz, we always
Yeah.
called him. He was wasting water. And he just got so irritated at him. You'll remember that too. But you just had to, and Paul used to say, my husband, he used to say that when they came home from elementary, they would stop up at the corner and look across to see where Papa was and come home accordingly to miss him so they didn't have to work. And one time he didn't rake the barnyard and Papa got him up out of bed. And he had to go down and rake the barnyard because that was his job. He didn't do it, you're gonna do it.
Pretty strict.
He
Yes.
really
Old
was.
school, from
He
the
really-
old school.
Yeah, he really was.
And when do you think this picture, oh, let's see if it says. Nope. Hager. This is number 9. Again, the barn and the pond and one of the islands.
This was our garden area along there.
And what was raised in the garden?
Oh, we put everything in.
Vegetables and...
Yeah. Papa
Yeah.
finally left me alone and let me plant. when I first moved there, he was watching. Don't put them so thick. You know, he really got after me. But he finally left me alone, let me plant garden, whatever I wanted.
Good.
So that just kind of shows the main house and the barn in proximity
Right.
that the other show.
Yeah, this
one
was the
doesn't
barn
show.
that fell down. I heard that one Sunday afternoon.
Really?
I heard this creaking, and I looked out the back window of, of the house here,
Uh-huh.
and there went the barn.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Total.
What a shock.
It was. It really was.
Yeah, that's probably what? I'd say what, the 60s, maybe 70s?
Yeah, probably, because I think I was still doing
Well, this
garden
is
down
still here.
there. Yeah, and the white barn's gone.
Yeah.
And he had a little boat there, right? He kept a little boat. In one
Yes.
of the
Yeah.
pictures you showed a little boathouse for the
Yeah.
boat.
Yeah.
So he would just row the boat around the pond?
Yeah, and all the kids
Or the
did.
kids, yeah.
All the
Those are
kids.
good.
They just
Yeah.
loved it down there.
Oh, yes. Kids, you can understand
Yeah.
that. Now, your husband was a milkman.
Right.
And this is a wonderful picture of a milk wagon. So tell us about that.
Well, that's his old antique. He picked that up someplace.
Oh, so this wasn't really his...
No, that was his
just-
advertisement.
Ah,
Yeah,
and it
we
says
really
Hager,
don't
so it
have a
looks like
picture of him
great-
with he drove a Diffco, one of the stand-up milk trucks.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Or
he,
several of them I think he had
Yeah,
at different
he
times
did.
depending on
He
when they
had-
died.
yeah.
He'd have another one. But
he had a red one we always called what do we call that? The fire engine? Because it always went. It was a big old red truck. And whenever the Diffcos failed or anything, the little old red engine would go.
What is a Diffco?
Diffco, it's a kind of a vehicle like Ford or any other brand.
Okay.
But it's the
Diffco.
one
It's
they
a
stand up
it's a
in
stand-up milk truck.
to drive
Right. And so he would deliver this
don't know
to
whether-
the houses
to
around, right?
houses. Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was
And they said when he was around 10 or 11 years old, he went out on his bicycle and sold milk in the neighborhood.
Even as a young kid?
As a young kid, he sold milk.
That's
His
great.
older brother Ernie, tended the cow. And
So he sold milk from the
family
place
cow.
Oh,
Originally.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. I
Yeah.
didn't know that one.
Yeah, he rode his bike, they said,
Oh, mhm.
and went out in the neighborhood and sold milk.
Wow, that's great. We have about 3 or 4 minutes left. What are some early memories? Now, you were not born in Milwaukee. You came
No, I was born
in
from Multnomah.
right,
the
and so
others.
you came into Milwaukee in what year?
Well, we moved here in 48.
48. So, what are some of your early memories of Milwaukee?
Oh, I just remember Main Street was totally different. Perry's was in a teeny little L-shaped building
Behind the bank building.
behind the bank building, well, the old bank building.
Right. Yeah.
And I remember Elder's Hardware. It was real neat. It was just an old wooden floored, dirty old store. I mean, they didn't keep it neat and clean. It was dusty, and it was just really neat. And then they built the new Perry's, and then there's Price Right Grocery, and Bud Cooper. I always traded there.
Right.
And what else was down on Main Street? Oh,
We talked before about the Victory Theater. Oh, what was it you were telling me?
oh, my mother-in-law thought the whole town was going to be totally unglued with a theater in town.
And why was that? Why did she think that?
She just thought you just didn't need it. It just wasn't right.
It wasn't right to have that kind of entertainment,
Yeah,
movie theater.
that's what she thought.
Yeah, yeah.
But I only got to know her for about 3 years. And she's a very, very sweet lady. Very
Was she from
sweet.
Switzerland also?
Yes. She was from the Italian side.
Yeah, I was going to say, because her.
Yeah. And her mother lived with them, Mutti, we always called her. And old Uncle Godfrey, he lived behind the kitchen stove. I can remember when we went over there, he was always sitting hunched in his corner behind the big old range.
Ah.
And
They're both up in the cemetery, in the Pioneer
Oh,
Cemetery.
and here in Milwaukee by Waverly.
yeah,
Yeah. That's great.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah, the teenies for the kids' clothes, and Milwaukee Pharmacy was there
yeah.
across from Perry.
Oh,
Well, a
and
little bit
teenies,
later, yeah.
And Safeway
Red
was
Dazzler.
actually where the dime store was.
Right.
The Olsons.
Yeah,
Side by side,
that was Safeway when we first came, and it moved right away down to the new
Other end
building.
of
Right. Yeah.
And then what was on the corner where the bank is now? That I can't remember. Next to it was
Hosley's.
well, that was on the other side, but and then there was Norbeck's
Oh, I've got a picture
hardware
of
store.
Hosley's on Monroe side.
Oh, have you?
Yes, it's
Then
a
they-
great big picture.
Then they must
Hosley's,
have
and
moved.
then they moved.
Oh, and then there was the little Norbeck's, I believe the name was, hardware store, and it was red. I remember that, painted red on the
Yeah.
outside. It was just a skinny little store there, and
And Res Badsler had the grocery store.
yeah,
Yeah. The good old days.
Yeah. Yeah,
Thank
that
you.
was when they came down. We went down to the produce market and bought the produce for the day.
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Elizabeth Hager and Madalaine Bohl.
it certainly was.
We've been talking today about Hager's Pond, which is still intact in Milwaukee on the corner of 27th and Washington. If you've never been there, please go by. You will love it. Thank you for joining us. This is State Representative Carolyn Tomei. This is Milwaukee Today, only we've been talking about Milwaukee yesterday. Thank you for joining us, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.